came back into session. We'll go ahead and get started. Please.
I'm not kidding you. This is the introduction. Okay. Hand this out. Okay, you ready to go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Nika is handing out a little introduction. We're not going to put this introduction on the screen. It'll just be easier for Frank's team to operate on redevelopment. But I wanted to give you kind of a lead in to this discussion. This is a follow-up to where we're at on the Lake Development project. Frank Murphy is representing Lynn Jackson. He's on the team of his people and consultants that he'll introduce a little bit later. And they'll go over what we've been doing in great detail. In addition, I think he's got some folks that are remote from this location, and they'll be calling in at some point to provide some input later on into what they've been doing. So you can anticipate that. What?
Can I give?
Okay, yeah, we got Jason, I thought something, there's Boyd from the First Southwest, and that's pretty much our team. So, again, operating off of this handout that June just gave you, I want to give you kind of an idea of what we're going to cover. First, we're going to talk about some background issues that you should kind of keep in mind, in the back of your mind, as you're going through the full presentation with Frank's team. We're going to review the existing leases and the structure of the leases. You've heard this before, but I wanted to make sure you understood the situation on the ground as it stands today, because that's fairly critical in going forward in the future. Of course, again, later on, after we get done with that, Lynn Jackson will go into the status of site planning, cost estimates, various feasibility studies that they've done, and at the very end, we want to talk about what the next steps might be in going forward with this project. So turning the page, the major background issues that we have. Number one, we have existing property interests on the ground that have to be incorporated into the process or dealt with in some way. I'll talk about that a little bit more here in a minute. The project scope, as we have it today, is a hotel with 3.5-star construction quality, 4-star operations quality, 300 rooms. So when they're talking about a hotel, we'll go into detail on that as far as where it's located, etc. But that's what we're talking about, the type of hotel that you'd be attempting to attract to this location. The project also includes a convention center that's 50,000 square feet. The project includes extensive channel dredging in the cove that's cutting into the middle of the property with bulkheads on a portion of the cove. They have identified a spot for, basically it's 3 restaurants. It's a single location, but it's 3 restaurants basically all kind of side by side, mirroring more or less the square footage that's associated with the Sneaky Pete's site, I think, roughly speaking. But it'd be at least 3 different operators or 3 different flags, if you will. We've got the relocation of some of the marina facilities involved in this. Right now, Eagle Point has some dry storage and some operations that are kind of in the middle of the existing lease site, and with the hotels there, then obviously those things have to be either relocated or go away. And Frank's team has been talking extensively with Russ Trepp, and by the way, Russ is here with other folks from the Slalom Shop, and I think John
Munson.
Okay. Sneaky Pete's facility is also one of those locations that's affected by the site planning, and it basically have to go away as well. Future private development is part of the project scope, primarily the DCTA site and the Tower Bay site. Those are separately owned, they're not part of the leases. DCTA you know very well. The Tower Bay location is privately held, and you'll see what they have master plan for that area, but that would be basically outside the lease area. And then, of course, there's a phased additional hotel development. It's really not hotel per se. It's more of a specialty lodging concept on the south side of the cove, which you'll see when they go through their plans. So that's kind of the project that we're talking about. In terms of project financing, that's of course the big TBD. We don't know. We have to go out to the marketplace to find out exactly how something like this would be financed. Financial conditions, the marketplace are changing on a daily basis. They're gradually improving. Certainly if we were trying to address this 2 years ago, project financing would probably be a big O zero. But things are improving these days, and so hopefully the marketplace will be able to give you some kind of proposal at some point in time that makes sense to you. Additional major background issues to kind of keep in the back of your mind are the range of economic development tools that you have at your disposal and may need to be dealt with or brought to bear to make the project a reality. Those include the tax increment reinvestment zone. You're very familiar with this. We have 2 of them in town already. We may have an expanded area for that reinvestment zone, not just the marina lease area or the Tower Bay and DCPA area. It may be possible to grow that reinvestment zone to the west side of the interstate where there's a lot of vacant land. And if you do that, then you have the possibility of capturing more tax value within the zone to use for the purposes of making this project happen. So that's a TBD thing as well.
The state did add a lot more flexibility to TERSs over the last couple of years, didn't it?
The state?
Yeah.
No, I don't know of anything in particular.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of anything.
Got some paperwork I need to sit down and sign it.
And of course, you've got your range of 380 agreements, rebates of various taxes. This project has the advantage of generating not only property tax in the form of the improvements on the property, but sales taxes, mixed drink taxes. So you've got some things in there that you can play with to help with financing. And of course, infrastructure participation is something that's a possibility as well. The EV5 program, y'all have asked about that in the past, and that's a possibility, not at the level that we had originally been looking at, but perhaps at the $1 million level. That's not something that you have to do too much about. That's basically private investment that would be coming in with those types of financial participation. But whether you want to open up the project with that type of financing structure or not remains to be seen. But I wanted to mention that it is something that we think might be feasible, but only at the $1 million level. That means that someone has to be able to contribute $1 million in order to be eligible for that particular program. And of course, by contributing that, they're probably going to be asking for a much greater return on equity. But the extent to which that plays a role in financing remains to be seen, but it is one of those tools that's available too. The difference, of course, was I think some of you went to TML and went to a seminar where they had talked primarily about this program at the 500,000 level of investment, and that one is not available to us because of the employment characteristics of this area. And then special districts. There may or may not be avenues to create public improvement districts or municipal management districts in this area. The problem with this is that conventionally, under state law, most of these special districts require that there be a petition from the property owner to have a district formed. And of course, these districts usually have some kind of overlapping assessment or tax rate of some kind. But in this particular case, the property owner is the Corps of Engineers or the federal government. Well, the federal government is not going to petition us to form a special district. They may not object to some sort of special district if there was legislation allowed that didn't require them as a property owner to petition, but they're certainly not going to, I think Frank has confirmed this, volunteer to form one of those special districts. So we'll have to investigate whether or not that's feasible. May not need it, be maybe a nice tool to have if we could, but it's probably going to require special legislation to get done. Okay, very quickly, review of the existing lease structure, next page. First, the city has a master lease from the Corps of Engineers. It has a 25-year term, which means it's up in April of 2025. We don't have any language in that agreement about renewal. The agreement has been renewed on several occasions in the past. The LJH Corporation, which is short for Lacey J. Harbor Corporation, owns a sublease from the city on the northwest core property, and that's the portion of the core property that we're talking about here today. That's the area up around the DCTA station and the Eagle Point Marina. The LJH Corporation is our main sublessee. Now, the Eagle Point Marina owns a sublease on all the LJH premises from the LJH Corp. So you've got the city, you've got the Corp, you've got the city, you've got LJH, you've got Eagle Point Marina. All the sublease terms correspond to the master lease. In other words, they expire in April 2025 with no language about renewal. Okay, beneath that structure, next page, you have Sneaky Pete's Restaurant and Club. They own a ground lease from the Eagle Point Marina on part of the property, not the entire 80-acre site, but just the portion that's up near the tip of the little point that's on the northwest side of the property, northeast side of the property. In addition, the Slalom Shop owns a ground lease from Eagle Point, again on a smaller piece of the property up near the entrance. You see that from the highway. And then Eagle Point has several small kind of marina-based subleases for boat operators and folks like, well, Just for Fun, JP's Tour Party Co. Those are not necessarily land leases, I don't think, are they, Russ? Those are just, those aren't land leases. Yep. They're just kind of operating off the docks, basically. But all of those leases, basically the point I'm trying to make is that they represent property interests on the land. The court owns the land, but the lessees have a property interest. And much like you saw earlier where there were lessees in that Four Corners area that had to be dealt with in some fashion for the city to redevelop that property. The lessees here are folks that you have to work with. And whether that involves acquisition or negotiations with them as partners or co-developers remains to be seen. But that's something I want to have you keep your, again, this is a background issue. You have to kind of keep that in mind as you go forward. So to whatever extent those leases are there, there's some degree of potential land costs associated with them. So those are the deep background issues with that. I'm going to let Frank introduce his team and roll into his presentation.
Well, he does have quite a bit of employment hoteliers on the phone. Okay. So I'm not.
The folks that are on the phone is Benchmark Hospitality. They were the hotel consultants that were used for the feasibility studies on the hotels.
You want to go ahead and be introducing your
Yes,
You're on.
you should be in. Can you hear me?
We can, Larry. The whole room can.
Okay, Alex is on there with you also.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor, council members, city manager, staff, guests, we appreciate your time today to allow us to come present the results of our 2 years worth of study on this project. A very exciting project. We're really interested in it and really think there's an opportunity here with it. To start off with, I'd like to really introduce our team members first. On the phone first is Alex Cabanas and Bruce Burkhart with Benchmark Hospitality out of Houston. They're the hotel consultant we've worked with in the past on other projects and have asked them to assist us in the evaluation of the underlying viability of the hotel itself. We've got John Kessler with HKS Architectural Group, Jim Manson with TBG, Christopher Jackson with my company, our company I should say, Jim Weger with Jacob, used to call him Carter and Burgess, Brent Miller, and Michael Jackson with the company. Christopher, Michael, and myself, along with Clyde Jackson, the principals within Win Jackson. So with that, we'll go through the presentation real quickly here. Start off with kind of an overview. Clyde's giving you a great introduction as to what we're going to be going through here. We're going to talk about the master plan, what the concept is, what the layouts are, and most of the council members, I believe, have already seen this previously about a year ago. Then we'll get into what we looked at, how we phased the project. Associated with phasing, what are the cost estimates? What's the infrastructure necessary? What are the roadways? What are the entry features? What are the major cost items of both what we call common areas, like dredging of the waterways or the entry features, versus the private, which would be the hotel and the restaurants. And we're going to talk about the hotel due diligence. What is the market today for a resort hotel of a 3.5-star to 4-star type of operation program here? And Alex and his team will talk about that in great detail. Then we'll move in and talk about the projection of potential city revenues. We've looked at these revenues that may come to the city under this development, both from hotel motel, through property taxes, through sales tax, through alcohol tax, through concession fees. We've looked at potential other revenues that may come through a tourist district tax increment financing, as Claude alluded to, possible in the county. And we're going to do a quick comparison of the total cost to total revenues on that project. And then we'll come down, as Claude has already again summarized, in a quick conclusion of where we are and the next steps. And to start us off, I'm going to turn it over to Jim to let him go through the initial part of this.
Frank? As Frank mentioned, we started this process a long time ago in developing a physical plan, and our first step in the process, which also included a charrette with several people in this room, was to evaluate and understand the existing conditions, the existing context. At that point in time, we actually started both with the site we're focused on today of roughly 60 acres, which we call the north parcel, as well as all the south parcel, because we were looking at Lake Point, at the Lake Park, and the full context early on. We subsequently very quickly focused our efforts in master planning to the northern piece. In doing this overall sort of evaluation, a couple of the points that I want to point out because they have bearing on what we arrived at as a physical plan is we have taken into account the I-35 proposed improvement plans through our planning, working with Jim and Jacobs and understanding their plans. We have taken into account the access at Garden Ridge and the existing points that Claude pointed out from Slalom Shop to the marina to Tower Bay site, which is fee simple here, and focused our efforts on that area, which is the 60 that I mentioned. And zooming in and understanding the existing context in the process of starting the master plan, we spent a lot of time meeting with Russ, the marina, several folks, Slalom Shop, Tower Bay, touring the site with feet on the ground and understanding what's there. We do have, which is difficult to see from your vantage point, a series of images starting with the DCTA facility that exists here on 35, understanding how they access and park and service that facility and operate now, working around right in the middle of the site where you'll see in a moment where the resort center or resort hotel and conference center are proposed. Images 2 and 3 represent both parking lot side and lakeside views of Sneaky Pete's existing facility. And then working around the Tower Bay facility on slide 4 with your existing park and the existing boathouses up at slide 5. And then finally the boat sales at the Slalom Shop here, where we've actually proposed within the context of the master plan the primary rebranded entry for their overall complex. I think this is a summary of all the particulars with regard to the lease property and the existing facilities that Claude has gone through with you previously. Again, the 60+ acres in the lease provisions. Main things we're working around the marina, Sneaky Pete's, and the Slalom Shop, as well as DCTA and Tower Bay. And so now we get into some of our physical planning proposals for the property. Starting with master plan and overview. And I think you have enlargements in your package as well, which will be a little easier to see, but I want to start from the north and work south in terms of the general overview of the component parts of the master plan. Obviously, I've mentioned Tower Bay with the fee simple piece here and the park that surrounds it. We've actually proposed a multi-family residential program for that particular site as you work down 35 at Garden Ridge, and taking into account the adjacency of the DCTA facility and how we can work a sense of arrival, entry, and development opportunities for that site as we work around.
Jim, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Please point out to them the 537 contour and the core line that's been developed.
Great point. The two colors that you see wiggling around the plan that are very relevant to the process, as Frank mentioned, that red line that moves all the way through and touches all of the land uses is the 537 contour. Is basically the contour below which we're not building physical improvements unless we balance the cut and fill to accommodate that use, which the master plan does do. The yellow line actually represents the core limits on the parcel for the lease. So you do see DCTAs outside of those limits, Tower Bays outside of those limits, the balance of the properties within those limits. The slalom shop as you come down 35, and again the existing point of railroad crossing and entry to the site at that point, which we've actually proposed some amount of realignment. You'll see in some enlargements to create a branded sense of arrival and entry for the total complex, particularly the resort hotel and conference center. As you move down to the south, and there was mention earlier of the expansion and dredging of the cove to create waterfront and access for watercraft to the restaurant site of approximately 24,000 total square feet, or three opportunities for three smaller restaurants under a single contiguous development and all parked in that specific area. Moving around on a counterclockwise direction, the resort lodge and cabins here are proposed on the opposite side of that improved inlet. And then the rental marina and service, which in a smaller sense exists in this location approximately today, will be moved as we propose down in this area and operated through the resort hotel. The primary component of the master plan on the main central peninsula here is the resort hotel and conference center. Again, working over and around the 537 contour to maximize views and access, a really view shed to the lake itself. And then finally, the marina. We've actually worked to incorporate the marina. We've met extensively with Russ and the folks who toured the facility and understand how to actually create a compatibility both with grade, landscape, improved parking, some slips that move up into this area over the course of time, and to create a compatibility between the whole complex. And then finally, for me, the parcelization, a lot of what you'll see in the subsequent parts of the presentation in terms of phasing and costs were organized around these basic parcelization, which you see here in color-coded are the components which I've just reviewed from north to south, the park, Tower Bay, this lighter green are future development parcel potentials. This sort of reddish color are common areas you'll see referenced and see what those component parts are comprised of as we go through the marina. And some proposed expansion and compatibility over here with the park that we will discuss in more detail, DCTA, slalom shop, the restaurants, and the lodge, and then the resort hotel in the center. And so now I'll allow John to focus on just a few areas.
Sure. Well, I'm going to move a different direction than Jim did. I'm going to go south, north, and go clockwise, if you will, so just to be contrarian. But what this represents, and you'll see a shaded portion in here, so this represents kind of the enlargement area, if you will. And the restaurant complex, as we mentioned, was 24,000 square feet. There's 3 separate venues in there. It's all self-contained with its own parking. And as part of the dredging of this channel back in here, there's an improvement on a boardwalk and a hard edge, if you will, that will allow people to flow between the hotel and these restaurants if desired. And the rest of this area goes to more of a natural graded type transition back to the water through there. So there's opportunity for boats, courtesy slips that come and patronize the restaurants as well, beyond just the standard surface parking. And as you're probably aware, as you drive 35 through here, this will have obviously a very good view corridor from the freeway. So I think there's a natural amenity in terms of what ultimately, whatever the architecture is, if you will, be a highly visible feature there, which is obviously be very good for marketing of that facility. Jim had talked about the branding of this entry in here. That's right now there are some allowances for water features, those type of things, regrading in that area here, but that is For those of you who know, that intersection right there is a very difficult one, and really, we're basically leaving that in place and upgrading it because there was really no other options to kind of relocate that relative to the traffic issues where the improvements out there. Moving up a little bit, the DCTA site is ultimately proposed to take its existing parking and replace it within a parking structure, and then develop about 120 housing units on top of residential units on top of that, or apartments. There would be some ancillary retail, we would think, within there, be small amounts that would probably be mostly subsidized by the residents within there. But ultimately, that's one of the few simple properties right now are really outside the core that could start tomorrow should there be a market. But we think obviously when the hotel takes them on and those type of things, it's probably more likely that in that scenario would justify that. But the whole thing about this development I find very intriguing is the fact that it's a TOD lakeside, which I think is very, very unique in the DFW area. So it's kind of hard to kind of quantify the impact of that, but I think from a standpoint of a unique project, I can't think of another one where there's that connections to the airport, ultimately the DART, DCTA, and that type of thing could be another plus as we go through the fertile future financial analysis and those type of things. So something to be played off of as well. Tower Bay property, that's again another one that could start tomorrow. This was a more conventional project where there's really the buildings themselves, the residential buildings would be on the ground with surface parking basically down the middle. There were, as we'll go into a little more detail, some refinements and expansion of the marina through here and that type of thing, as well as making a connection from the south to this parking area here that's been part of our thinking as well. The crown jewel of all this is really the hotel and conference center. And there is that main entry feature. You can only imagine this wonderfully landscaped road just sort of sloping up to the arrival of the main lobby of the hotel right through here. The conference center, which is about 50,000 gross square feet of space, has its own separate drop-off right here in parking. And the whole facility is serviced by basically it's going to be an at-grade one-level parking structure that's built on top of the existing hilltop out there roughly, and then we'll be sloping the roof on top of that. So ultimately it becomes underground parking right through there. So very convenient from the convention center. There's a ramp here, there's a ramp here for the hotel. The hotel itself is envisioned to be a 4 or 5 story building. 2 wings are oriented right now at this point in time to really maximize the views of the lake, and some extraordinary water features and amenity areas that would step down to the waterfront through there. And that hard edge extension actually comes all the way up to this general area here. We're anticipating some courtesy slips here as well. The hotel may have opportunities to cater to light traffic as well on the weekends or whatever, that type of thing, and during the week. And all this parking, as Jim pointed out, is really associated with the marina. There's a fairly extensive grading transition right there. At that point would be landscaping, very natural. That type of thing would be the transition for the new proposed marina parking areas, which is stepped as well. We still have some boat dock or boat lift access shown from here, so, and some proposals for new marine offices and maintenance facilities to kind of consolidate and relocate those within the overall master plan. Oops. Okay, we can get into the lot.
Back on me first.
Okay, all right, let me back up 1 second, I'm sorry. Okay, there's another component that was alluded to earlier, is it's actually going to be run by the hotel, what we've been calling it the lodge site. It's got a series of cabins, and it is a total of 11 cabins and 4 units within the lodge, and it's more of a rustic hotel product, if you will, but still very upscale. It was just a different product offering in there that is usually very successful. It's just kind of another boutique type development for the hotel. So it would offer a different, more intimate experience, obviously more, probably more casual, lake-oriented, those type of things, especially with its proximity to the boat dock area over here. So with that, if there's any questions, I will
going to get in now and talk about the phasing of the project. And we'll talk about the cost estimates associated with the phasing and timing of the order. What we have here is very simple. 3 colors on the left-hand chart depicting the phases. The phase 1 is in the red, phase 2 would be the green, and phase 3 would be the yellow. Real quickly, we'll go through this. The total cost of the entire project through all phases, both what we call common and public or private, would be approximately $161 million over several years of development. Phase 1 primarily consists of what we call multiple items, the common area, which includes the roads of $15 million, development entry zones. We'll get into great more detail of each one of these in the next slide. This kind of summary further. Community park, future development phases or parcels that are unnamed right now as far as particular use goes. The marina, the rental dock, slalom shop, the restaurant complex, the Tower Bay multifamily, resort hotel and conference center. All of those are expected to be provided for in phase 1. Phase 2 would consist of road C, a water line, and resort lodge and cabin, which are right down in here again in green. Phase 3 would be primarily consisting of the DCTA site up in here. Now, the future phases, phase 2, especially phase 3, can easily be accelerated should the need or the demand arise for those earlier than what we have projected in here. So the infrastructure that goes in phase 1 can accommodate other development timing. It doesn't have to be in the order we presented here. Then we talk about common versus private. And this is just kind of stepping up and saying what would be the potential for private investment and development in the area. The private is basically shown in the blue, and the public is shown in the orange here. The private, for the most part, is $137 million, consists of the restaurant again, the Tower Bay, resort hotel, and conference center, and a resort lodge and DCTA. The common areas, again, similar things that we talked about before, and the common areas expected to total approximately $24 million. Phase 1 itself, this is a little bit closer look at what the cost associated with phase 1 would be. Total again to $134 million. Private would be expected at $111 million, and then the common would be $23 million. Phase 1 again, restaurant complex, Tower Bay, resort, hotel, and conference center. And then the common areas, we talked about these, only $23 million. Phase 2, primarily consisting of the improvements and the items necessary to service the lodge. That's $7 million total. Phase 3, again, the DCTA site. These are unnamed parcels. They are future development opportunities, but they are restricted by core use. So it'll have to be something that's permissible by core, but we provided for the potential of development of those in the future. Those are not included in the revenue stream numbers, nor the taxes and so forth that we get into. Common area, take a little bit closer look at the common area itself. 17 million total, primarily consisting of the main entry feature and the secondary entry right here in the green. Roads, the 3 roads primarily coming here, here, and here. You've got the leg excavation, grading, the secondary wall. All this will be excavation. As John has mentioned, we'll have a edge and grading here. Also, some of it back up in here will be a secondary wall. Promenade parking, paving courtesy slips, breakwater. That's what's shown in the yellow right here. Expecting a hard edge all the way around. Also, we're planning a approximately 400-foot, what we call wave attenuation, really a wave break feature out here. The water and sewer layout, it's not shown on here, but it's expected in phase 1 at approximately $1.8 million. This is the water itself. So where will the water be coming in at? The water is meant to be brought to the site and serve the entire development, not just a particular project. We expect to bring in a 12-inch off-site line by crossing I-35. And then various other lines coming down through here as well. You can see the site water line comes in to service the gas dock as well as the hotel in phase 1. $672,000. Sewer improvements, same concept, approximately $1.1 million. Be an off-site sewer line coming from west of 35, crossing 35. This will be a gravity flow. It will have a force main coming in here served by lift station. It will have other gravity flows coming from the multifamily, the restaurants, down through here. We'll have another lift station from the gas stop coming up to here to the gravity flow from there. These are phase 1 improvements, so you can see that we're basically providing the water and services necessary for the phase 1 development. Hotel due diligence, this is the area that we will hand it off to Alex and Bruce on Benchmark Hospitality, who's on the phone. Alex, your call. We're on slide 25, sir.
Great, Frank, thank you very much. Can you all hear me okay on the phone?
Yes.
Okay, great. We can hear you just about perfectly, but probably not loud enough if there's any way for the phone to be better located after we speak. But thank you, everybody. Again, this is Alex Cabanas. I'm President of Business Development and Finance for Benchmark Hospitality. We are based down here in Houston, Texas, so not far away. My apologies, we couldn't be there in person. We both of us had just came home from a trip yesterday and weren't able to get up there this morning, but appreciate everybody's time and interest. Just a couple of upfront comments I want to make on the hotel and just how we thought through the concept of what would ultimately work for the city and in this particular location. Benchmark is particularly experienced in the development of destinations and conference-oriented resorts and hotels. So as we thought about this, we really thought through the physical needs of what is needed to create the destination. So a lot of the resort elements that you see, and as we call it, a combination of living, learning, and leisure. The combination of a great hotel environment on the living side, combination of a great conference environment on the learning side, and the combination of a resort environment on the leisure side. So the marina, the restaurants, all of the other elements that make a rounded business model. This property has to have a significant component of group business to ultimately be successful at the level of quality that we're looking to build. So from a business model standpoint, we thought through it as anywhere from 40 to 60% group-oriented business, which is fairly consistent with a lot of the properties of similar nature that we run, and a lot of properties that have been built in markets like Lewisville that, for the most part, as you'll see in the materials the next few slides, is made up of limited service hotels and really economically would not support it alone, but ultimately has to compete for regional resort and group business. Obviously, we want significant community support and engagement, not only from the city, but also just from a community standpoint. This is an amenity to all of the recreation that goes on the lake, all of the businesses that you're attempting to recruit, obviously all of the residents that ultimately may live there, that this becomes the place where every wedding, bar mitzvah, confirmation, quinceañera happens. This should be really the centerpiece and a living room to the overall community of a place that they can gather. If you think about demand sources as we go into the slides, the first slide in the hotel due diligence, slide 25, you really think through demand sources for a hotel in two categories. It's an easy way to think about it. It's stolen demand, or demand you steal from a competition in the local market, or where there's already a need for a hotel room or a guest night in a given location, or induced demand. Demand that does not currently come to the market because the product is not there. Obviously, with a property like this, we are relying significantly more on the latter type of demand, induced demand, in bringing groups and conferences and events and resort leisure destination travel to the city of Lewisville, to the lake, to the marina operation, to the resort, as well as to the conference center on the group side. So we really studied three competitive sets. As you'll see, we looked at a Dallas-Fort Worth regional competitive set, which you'll see some properties that you may all be familiar with that are group-oriented, that are in the local North Texas region of Dallas and Fort Worth. We looked at the second piece, which is a mid-scale resort comp set, so this would be regional within Texas. We know all these properties extremely well, have operated a couple of these properties, and have studied them all. So these are properties, not the only set of properties, but a bulk of the set of properties that you would compete with in this property for regional Texas business or business that may be flying into a major city within Texas and has a reasonable drive to be able to get to their destination for a group event. And then the last set is the local Lewisville comp set. So this is obviously properties that you all are familiar with, of the limited service sets that are properties that are located in the market. When you go to the second page, this second page compares the hotel projected rate. So in the first couple of lines, the occupancy average daily rate is ADR, and the revenue per available room. Those are really the three important metrics of the economics of the hotel. And this is what we benchmarked, ultimately projected for this hotel and conference center that we're building, or we're looking to build. The next three lines are the competitive information. So if you go back, if you look at the two pages next to one another, is probably easiest. The DFW comps is that first set of competitors, the regional Texas comps are the second, and the Lewisville comps are the third. You can see the DFW is kind of in the middle, the Texas comps are the higher RevPAR, and the Lewisville comps are the lowest. And if you look at the graph down below, which is just an easy way to physically look at it all on one page, you see the hotel line, which is the blue line. We anticipate that this hotel, based on a positioning at a 3-diamond physical quality, there's a lot of elements to the physical quality that we talked about with Wynn Jackson, that we talked about with the architects, in terms of trying to minimize the cost associated with the construction, given the market that supports it. This is fairly consistent approach we've used in other similar markets, where really the bulk of the competition locally is made up of limited service at, call it 65% at $99 rates. And there is not the upscale market to compete with. And so being cautious about how we build the infrastructure to support the economics of the hotel. The second piece of that, though, is the service level being higher than the quality level physically. So building it physically and smartly in terms of what we spend, to us is very different than the way we position the property. So a great example of this, and easier to talk about examples, is Chattanooga, Tennessee. We built a 200-room, 20,000 net square foot conference center in Chattanooga, Tennessee. The entire market is made up of limited service hotels, and we built that property at a 3-diamond budget, but that property has been rated 4-diamond ever since it opened. So a lot of the soft good elements, as well as the service and food and beverage and the overall experience, is still positioned at an upscale level, which ultimately will make the city proud of it and ultimately be an attraction for you to bring companies and residents there. But it's a little bit more intelligent in terms of how we spend the dollars on the construction side. The same for us exists in the Inn at Virginia Tech, which is on the campus of Virginia Tech University in Blacksburg, Virginia. Very similar competitive market and very similar construction quality of the physical facility, but has always been rated as a 4-diamond property with the service. So we've worked through a lot of those budget numbers to be very intelligent about how we spend the dollars, but this gives you a sense for how this property's performance would rank among those individual competitive sets. And then the last slide just summarizes the hotel pro forma in the gross operating profit associated with all elements of operations, rooms, food and beverage, spa and or any other ancillary revenue that would come, the operating expenses, and then ultimately the net operating income, which is the cash flow from that property. Obviously this is run out over a much longer period of time, which, as I tell Frank, I'm no better at predicting the future than anybody else. But it's a reasonable look at what a 5-year ramp-up would be and what the value of the property could be over a long period of time to ownership, and takes into account the construction cost and future net sales price associated with the hotel.
Thank you,
That
Alex.
was a very, very quick run through the economics of a hotel, so I'll take a pause and either we could do questions now, or Frank, I'm not sure if nobody's been asking questions so far, so maybe we're saving that to the end.
We'll probably come back to that, Alex. Really, I'm going to touch base a little bit more on slide 27. I want to point out the left-hand column. This is the total over a 27-year period of time. It shows net operating income of $193 million, construction costs of just under $70 million today, and future sales price of net of $108 million, and then net profit over 27 years of $232 million. It does show the cost incurred the next 2 years, the net sales price is 27 years out. This does include the concession fee to the city of Lewisville. And it shows here that the first 4 years, as Alex has already alluded to, are the ramp up, and then the 5th year basically is when we stabilize. All revenues thereafter are projected to increase by 1.5%. Expenses are projected to increase by 2%. So there's not substantial projected growth beyond this period of time. We'd hope to exceed that, but the projection we're trying to be a little bit conservative here. So it stabilizes in the $6 to $7 million range over about a 5-year period of time. Now we want to talk about the revenues from all these sources here. Starting with the quick summary, this is only on new development. This is the hotel, DCTA, Tower Bay, the restaurant. It does not pick up revenue from the marina. It does not pick up revenue from the slalom shop. Those are already existing uses. So we tried to look and say what would be the new revenues coming in here. Now, the Sneaky Pete's, we do have revenue in here for the new restaurants, but we did not deduct anything the city currently receives as a result of Sneaky Pete's operations out there today. So that is a little bit of overlay here. The rates we've included, the current property tax, the current sales tax, the net alcohol tax to the city, not the gross, because you have to give some back to the state and so forth. So this is the net amount. The hotel motel tax, the concession fee under the current lease structure is 1% on hotel operations, 3% on restaurants. We didn't factor in anything on boat sales or marine operations either. As far as the restaurants go, we looked conservative and said let's use $3 million total sales, of which $2 million would come from food, $1 million from alcohol. In comparison to other restaurants in the city, they range from basically $2.5 million up to $6 million per restaurant. So we feel that $3 million per restaurant hopefully is a conservative number going forward. Revenues, we're going to talk about revenues from each individual source as to not only the source but also what types of revenue. First one is the resort hotel. Over a 27-year period of time, total revenue to the city is expected to be over $60 million. Consisting of property taxes, sales tax, and alcohol tax, revenue sales tax, the hotel motel, and the concession fee. As you can see here, it starts off in 2016, so we're expecting to deliver the hotel January 1 of 2016, which would match up very closely with the timing of 35 construction. Starts off at about $1.3 million, escalate up and stabilize in the approximate $1.92 million range. See, the majority of the revenue comes from the hotel motel tax. And you see here, this is the ramp up and the stabilization of it. Restaurants, same type of look. 27-year window, $17 million, of which the bulk of it comes from the concessions of approximately $12 million. You have a minor amount, relatively speaking, property tax, and a larger portion from the sales tax. As the restaurants are delivered 1/1/16 with the opening of the hotel, the restaurants are basically expected to generate in 3 million sales per year per hotel immediately, with minor escalations beyond that. And the net amount of that revenue would be in the $400,000 range. Tower Bay. Tower Bay, again, as I mentioned earlier, is not within the core jurisdiction, so therefore it is excluded from the concession fee. There is no concession fee to come to this. We didn't attribute any sales tax that the residents may spend in that. We look purely at property tax generation for Tower Bay. Expected at $4.5 million over a 25-year window. Starting again 1/1/2016. The ownership of Tower Bay indicates that they would like to start construction as soon as possible. Lodge. The lodge is a restricted area within the core jurisdiction. It is very nominal overall, with a total of $3 million over 27 years, of which approximately 1/2 of it comes from the concession fee. And you can see that this is expected to generate, come on board 1/1/2019, so a 3-year delay before the hotel lodge comes on. DCTA, same concept, 3-year delay before it comes on. It is not part of the concession area, so therefore it is only generating property taxes. John mentioned there may be some ancillary retail associated with that. We didn't assume any retail sales for this projection. I think it's pure property tax. Total, which shows the total of all sources, the hotel, the restaurants, the multifamily, the lodge, DCTA. Over 27 years, expected to be 91 million total new revenues to the city. We also looked and said, what happens if just phase 1's built? What if the lodge doesn't come on the equation? What if the DCTA doesn't come on? That would be 83 million over that time frame. You see again, the bulk of it all comes from the hotel. Starts off approximately $1,800,000, 1/1/2016, ramps up on about 5-year time frame, in range of 2.3 to 2.5. Assuming just phase 1, keep adding all sources, we'll start off again the same numbers until we get 2019, in which it goes to 2,000,005. So you can see the 9 graphs showing what is it come in. So all things being developed within the projection, you're somewhere in the 2.5, 2.6 million range stabilized. You look at the additional tax sources other than truly to the city, i.e. picking up the TERS, the Tax Increment Financing District. We can't pick up the school district in that, but we can pick up the county. And the county has participated with the city and other districts as well. So if we look at just the Denton County taxes on all the developments over here, over basically a 25-year window, because the TIF is limited to 25 years to 25.5 years compared to the 27 we've shown previously. So this is just tax revenue over 25 years. Approximately 13 million, and we understand the county participated in the past in the 75 to 80% range, so that 80% would be 11 million, and 80% of just phase 1 is approximately $8 million. And you can see again that comes in 2016 with a slight jump in 2019 as the Tower Bay and as the lodge and DCTA come on board. This slide compares the total revenues and the total cost of the entire project. The total cost private, as we've seen before, is expected to be $137 million over primarily the first 5 years. The total cost for common area is expected to be 24, with the bulk of that occurred in the first 2 years. Total city revenues of 90 million plus, 80% of the county. For the TIF, be 10 million. The total potential revenue to this area would be $101 million. This slide down in here, this graph, the total cost private shows that the bulk of it again is private. The yellow is public or common, and then the blue is the revenue. So this is meant to show that the cost of the common area, 24 million, is significantly less in relationship to the total revenues coming in. Revenue stream over here, this shows that the first 2 years of construction, nothing generated, then you have a significant jump to approximately 2 million, then it escalates up to just under 3 million in 2019 and stabilizes with minor growth thereafter. This shows the cost, the private cost is incurred the first 2 years for the hotel and restaurants. Then it ramps up again the later 2 years as the lodge, DCTA are brought into the equation as well. The private cost, the public cost, or common area cost, is incurred primarily in the first 2 years with a small bump in 2017. So that's the revenue and the cost side of the equation. Hopefully we're conservative in those projections. Conclusions, you've got a total revenue source, potentially 102 million of new revenue coming in from all sources, both to the city as well as including 80% or 90% of all the taxes from the county. Total projected common cost of $24 million. The hotel itself, resort style, conference center, approximately 50,000 square feet, does appear to be operationally viable. It generates $232 million of total net profit over 27-year window. The question basically is how do you finance it today? And that's a whole nother discussion. We've had discussions with bond counsel and underwriters and other parties we can talk about later. But that's really the question, is how do you finance not only the common cost day one, but also the total amount of private cost as well. The next steps, We've got a few open items, as Claude's alluded to, possibility to continue to work with the court to finalize maybe the use of a special district overlay, working further with Russ and his staff and John with Lacey Harbor, as far as how the agreements with the leaseholders work right into this equation. How do we put the hotel on the project and restaurants in conjunction with the existing lease structures that's out there today? Then you've got the next steps. How do you get the thing launched once you've achieved those things? You can go to an RFP with another developer. We can, as our Win Jackson team, can step up and prepare the financing packages and actually go to the capital markets to try and produce the actual final results of how this thing gets launched. Open items, I mentioned these earlier. We've got potential agreements with Russ and Lacey Harbor to achieve. Potential buyouts, possible lease restructuring, possible partial release. The options that we talked about with Russ and Lacey, these are not new. You buy out the entire marina, put the entire ownership of the marina under one umbrella with the hotel. You release only the area necessary for the hotels and the restaurants, and leave everything else under the current lease structure. You may extend it, you may rework it, but you leave them in place. The other option is just to leave the entire lease structure as it is and provide an override of net revenue or gross revenue or something of that nature to compensate the existing leaseholders out there for their continued usage of the lease out there. Sneaky Pete's, that's a little bit more difficult animal out there. Concept on that one is very simple. What would it take to buy them out? Having them stay in and operate, possibility, it may not be what we want to do, it is a possibility. So our conclusion is basically the next step, continue to work with Russ and Lacey Harbor on how we bring the leaseholders into the equation to have a commonality and meeting of the minds on that one, as well as work with Sneaky Pete's on their participation or equity as well. Gentlemen, that's our presentation. Rod, Mayor, any questions?
Time for questions.
Can you, I do, just some of the numbers you threw out there. You had mentioned about 161 million at the beginning. Just to clarify, are you saying that is the total investment of everyone or just the city?
Everyone.
Okay, so and then later on you said the common costs, which I'm assuming you're meaning the city investment is going to be around 25 million?
That depends. It's all,
well, it depends
it's all
on,
subject to some kind of a proposal.
I understand. But he's, from the plan he's operating here is holistic. I love what I see. I really do. I think it's going to be awesome, you know, when it finally gets built. But I'm just looking at the cost. So that was my objections at the beginning. Do we want to invest in this big project in this city's time now? You know, as you know, we've talked that I just had some other parties that I would like to have seen done, but we're going forward with this. It's been, again, great work. So 25 million roughly, you said, from the city on this plan here?
The total common cost, we're expecting to be 24 million. How much of that ultimately ends up being private and funded that way versus city or financing through a TIF district, or special other methods? That's right to the heart of the matter. That's right, really, how do you finance the overall project?
Okay.
We're not making any assumptions in here as to what does the city pay for, what does the city finance, what's provided for.
I'm just looking at both parts.
This is just step back and looking from the general perspective.
You also alluded to that at the end of the year, over the 27 years, I'm curious, one question, why not 25 or 30, why 27?
Basically, that's a very simple answer. That's how far our financial model goes out to 27 years.
Okay, just a round number. So you said it was going to be about 160 million revenues coming to the city should all this get completed?
Approximately 91 million to the city and approximately another 11 million potentially available through the county.
Oh, 91 million.
And that TIF number only incorporates a TIF boundary on this area, not to the west of 35, as Claude mentioned, the possibility just to incorporate that area as well.
So that's 91 million is what you said over the 27 years.
Correct.
And then after that, it just proportionally continues.
It just, yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm just looking at total return on investment stuff.
Right to the heart.
So bottom line, private sector thinks this is a dual project.
We think the hotel is financially viable. The question again is how do we finance in today's market? Given that this is a resort destination with a conference center, there have not been that many hotels built in the past several years. There have been a few that are starting to come into the market right now. Alex alluded to one in Tennessee. We're aware of one in Lawton, Oklahoma that was built. There's one in Tyler getting ready to go. There's one in Lubbock. But most of those are the significantly smaller stature in size. 25 million total cost, under 200 rooms, 15,000 square feet convention facilities. We've talked to numerous financing sources, capital placement, debt equity groups as well. They're all indicating that the market has significantly improved in the past 9 months compared to what it was before. If we were looking at this in a year ago, it'd be a very slim chance. But what we're seeing today is significant improvement in the financing markets and capital availability. What form it takes is really the question.
I think there's a couple of things here that's really important for you to look at. One is the potential for actually reducing the cost of the common and the private developer to this project. If you cross over and include your TIF or TERS on the west side of the freeway there, where all of that land is currently undeveloped. And at some point in time, that land is going to develop. So if you included that in there, all that money would then dovetail over into the project, which just makes it, the numbers 10 times more viable. The other thing I think you'll see, what he was just referring to is the financing things have really changed in the last 9 months, even the last 6 months, into private and public participation. Probably public participation requirements have probably been cut in half of what they were a year ago, 2 years ago to get a project developed. So now you're having to have much less public participation to get a project of this magnitude developed than you would have 6 months or 2 years ago.
The goal obviously would be to minimize to the greatest extent possible any type of public participation.
And that keeps improving. So, you know, we're a little ways out to getting this thing built. So, you know, projections are, as this thing goes on, I really commend you, council, for having us do this work, as you say, we've been doing it for 2 years now. But we're far enough along now that we've got a plan in place, and as this money comes open, we've got a project that can be put on the ground.
And if I may interject, we have incorporated into this total cost what we believe some conservative numbers. So is there an opportunity to reduce it somewhat? We would hope so. We hate to say this is what you can develop it for, and it comes in 25% greater. So hopefully there's a little excess in the cost numbers as well.
The issue of financing raises an interesting timing issue, because you want to be able to time your next steps, whatever those are, as Frank alluded to at the end of his presentation, to at the best possible moment. You want to enter into that capital market or seek those development proposals at the best possible time, because again, like Dean said, if you tried to do it 2 years ago, you probably gotten 0 responses. Similarly, that cycle is going to probably up and down again at some point in the future. So when you actually go out is one of those decision points that we'll have to talk about.
Are there suggestions? Because I don't know about you, but I'm no market reader.
Yeah, we need Frank and benchmark and First Southwest to predict future.
I think what
You got that late ball this year?
Boy, can do that.
But yeah,
Boy,
boy,
right
now, rates are gonna rise.
but to that point,
You're predicting to the guy on the phone. How about that? To defend myself.
There you go.
But the key to that, and the answer to that question is that we don't know exactly when, but I think it's very important that we're ready when that time comes. That we have a project, we have a plan, we have something that is ready to put on the ground, ready to start when that money, when that opportunity hits. We're ready. We're not sitting there scrambling trying to put something together.
Yeah, another timing factor, and it's actually turned out, we were very worried about this a year ago, but it's turned out to be, I think, to our advantage, is that 35E
Right.
which we had total uncertainty about a year ago. Now we at least have some uncertainty as to phase one.
Sure.
And the timing of that project and the timing of the development schedule that Frank's laid out here actually dovetail fairly well.
Very
So
nice.
you don't have the issue of trying to get somebody interested in a hotel development while 35's tearing up the frontage for 3 or 4 years of their first operation.
And the other key point of this, which I don't know if you've got a slide on, it's the very first where it showed the whole layout, the southern end. So, you know, there's the first one that's got the whole project. No.
Actually, the analysis that shows the south property as well.
Yeah, it shows the southern property. Because we haven't even talked about that yet.
Yeah.
In that, huh?
That's stuff along 35 in the south.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
That whole southern end down there, if you look at it, see where the boat slips are up at the top part? Just right in there is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
That little piece right in there. If you come on down that southern end, and we've got a way to connect the two, we have a viable way to connect the two pieces through there. But that whole southern end it needs to be developed also, and the development costs on that are going to be much less. And while you might not have as much potential for restaurants and stuff, but other amenities, whether it be water parks, golf courses, museums, whatever it be other amenities that go down in there, and the cost for those things are much less because we only have one sublease holder to deal with, and they would probably be interested in working with us on dealing with, and that's the golf course. So that's the second piece of this puzzle that really draws a developer's attention. It's like, not only do I have this up here, but boy, I've got this whole piece down here. And it's an interesting point when you look at it, and trust me, I'm not trying to say you put a Gaylord hotel in. I'm not trying to say that, no. But when you look at this property in comparison to the size of what the Gaylord is, this size is about 4 times, this property is about 4 times as large as what that property sits in.
You're including the golf course and everything?
I'm including the southern end too, right?
The trick on that is whatever the Corps will allow. Some of the
Right.
stuff they won't probably allow.
Right. But recreational stuff they're all pretty much for.
Just for clarification, the mayor was talking about the southern property. Your presentation was just that top portion.
Correct. We actually studied the southern portion pretty intently early on and came very quickly to the realization that the primary focus for the next few years should be concentrated on the north. There are significant access hurdles and various other issues associated with the south, which needs the market to mature a little bit more before that would be a viable development opportunity. But it is potential in the future.
Because the catalyst is the north end to get it kicked off. But then once that's there, there's opportunity to expand into that southern end, which you can see the size of it. It just makes it more of a destination place for the city to bring in outside dollars to the community.
Now, I would be remiss, and I should have mentioned this earlier, the cost numbers in here do not include any of the compensation necessary to be paid to the underlying sublease holders, Russ and Sneaky Pete's and so forth. Those numbers are not in here. And I alluded to 3 options: a buyout of the entire lease structure. That's the most expensive, would result in the most cost up front. The middle one, which is basically releasing the areas necessary under the lease for the restaurants and the marina. That's the middle ground. Okay? The least expenses up front may cost the most at the end of the day, but the least expenses up front will just continue the existing lease structure with them and pay them a percent of something coming out on an annual basis. So there's 3 concepts out there for that, and those numbers are not built into here. The other thing I want to go back and touch base on is what Claude mentioned earlier, the EB5. This is a program you guys are familiar with, which has seen significant increased interest and usage over the past few years. The 500,000 level of investment for Green Card, that's happening all over the United States, and it has been very successful, especially in usage of hotels. It is not applicable here because the demographics of the census tracts do not meet the qualifications for us to utilize the 500,000 level. We have to go to the 1 million. So it's viable. You have to pay more for the usage of that, i.e. a higher return to the participants, but it is a viable use, and that is being done elsewhere in the United States as well. So the EB5 is another possible financing tool to consider usage.
And that's why we have Boyd and Jason here too, because they've been working with the city, with Wynn Jackson on looking at financing projects and what you can do and what's out there. Does anybody got any questions? Anything on it? Really, we don't need anything from council other than just to continue moving forward as we have in the past and continue to try to fine tune it to get it ready to go to market. Is that right, folks?
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Thank you guys for your audience and time today.
I appreciate it. Appreciate all your work.
Thank you.
Alex, thank you, sir.
Thank you for being on the call.
Everybody,
What's that?
thank you.
Take care.